Awesome. Welcome to productbook.club. This is our 15th book of 24 books, and we have actually kind of restructured it to make it more reader friendly. So we are now at a review cycle of 2 weeks per book. Hence, this makes it 15th book of this, and this is the last book of this year. So you can also catch up on the reviews on our YouTube channel. It's on, YouTube/Product Book Club. Very direct URL. You cannot forget it. Today, we are reviewing The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, the most quoted, the most gifted, the most given book to everybody who is trying to think of starting up or trying to figure out how do I get my own MVP on the road. Our all-girl gang superstar is going to get started to review this and give you the top 10 things that you can learn from this. We have more books coming up next year. Next year's first book will be the customer-driven playbook. The date for the review will be shared towards the end of the session, so you can understand how and to be a part of it. And the enrollment for the reading sprint also happens towards the end of it. So what happens in a product book review? You have 10 big ideas that are distilled under 30 minutes. The best way, you can read the book. Trust me, you can, but if you don't have enough time, attend these product book reviews under 35 minutes, max 40 minutes, you learn these top 10 concepts from a book. And over to you, sprinters, good luck. And let's hear the 10 lean principles from this book. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and you can share the screen and get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Madhuri, for setting up the stage very nicely. A very good evening, everyone, once again. Thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday evening. And today we are here, as Madhuri have already mentioned, to review The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. This book basically tells us about the businesses and especially startups, like how to start small and simple, then grow through learning, testing, measuring, and rapidly innovating. It actually shows the value of, actionable metrics for decision-making and the importance of pivoting. For those who have already read this book, I must say it's a practical rehearsal. But for those who didn't, it's a substantial introduction to the startup world, as Eric in this book has mainly focused on the aspect of how constant innovation creates radically successful business. Now, what actually this book has? This book has 3 parts. First part talks about the vision, second talks about the steer, and the third talks about the accelerate. It's more like a reference book, which has to be referred back and forth, because I personally felt that each chapter in this book has a lot to share with many inspiring startup journeys like Groupon's, Zomato's, etc. But we will be sharing the top 10 ideas with you all. Our team consists of Madhuri, myself, Harshita, Navya, and Akshata. Now, you all might be wondering who should read this book and why we should read this book. So those who all are aspiring entrepreneurs currently, and those who would like to keep themselves informed on business matters, this book is a must read for you all, because it's not just a book that, give you a real life examples of success or failures, but it is a book that teaches one about the business sense and the terms which one needs to be aware about. With that, I'll be sharing our first big idea of how the origin of Lean Startup happened. Some of you, or I believe most of you, are aware about the about the aspect of Toyota. Toyota is a Japanese multinational automotive manufacturer, and it has inspired us with a very interesting methodology of lean manufacturing models. And it was largely created by the Toyota founder, Sakichi Toyota. This in this, the Toyota production system has long been recognized basically as a way to eliminate, the waste and achieve how they can achieve high efficiency. So, however, its essence is to just make work easier and less burdensome for the workers with a focus on creating the meaningful work. So, what they have done, they have mainly focused on the two main aspects of Judoka and just in time. You all might be thinking what Judoka is and just in time stands for. So, Judoka is a way of spotting problems and taking prompt action to correct faults at any stage in the production process. Whereas just in time means making only what is needed when it is needed and the quantity needed at every stage of production. And by applying these concepts, you know what? Toyota was able to produce their products efficiently and at the pace of customer demand. And they have beautifully mentioned also that every vehicle has met their high quality standards and their customers' individual requirement. This lean manufacturing model is not only applied to the startup world, it can be applied to anywhere from automotive to healthcare to other aspects. So, with that, as I've already talked about the lean startup, lean manufacturing model, but what exactly a startup is? Startup is a human institution which is designed to create new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. And I'm sure you all must have heard of Dropbox. It's a personal cloud storage service that is frequently used for file sharing and collaboration. And it has been one of the first successful lean startups. You know why? Because the company started iterating their product much faster in order to test what customers really wanted early and often. And using lean startup principles in just 15 months, Dropbox went from 1 lakh registered users to over 40 lakh. Can you believe? And now, since we have talked about the basic aspects of lean startup, I would like to share about what exactly the framework behind. So the framework is known as build, measure, learn framework. So it's like when we have a big idea for a new product, we are very excited, and it's fair enough to run with that enthusiasm, start building the brand new world-changing product, convinced that everyone will see it like you do. But will they? The lean startup approach and the build, measure, learn cycle scientifically is a way of learning about user needs, exploring the issues, and testing your idea with the people you hope will benefit from it. So, this is where this framework actually helps. With that, our next big idea is about what are the principles of a lean startup. So, anyone who has a startup is an entrepreneur who can apply these lean startup principles. It doesn't matter if you work in a garage or a bedroom or a dedicated office. Our business could be from 2 people, 20 people, or more than that. If we are looking to save time and resources, a lean startup could be right up our alley. And hence, entrepreneurs are everywhere. Another principle talks about the no one size fits all approach. As we all know that in order to manage something, we have to take care of all the things, right? So how we manage our entrepreneurship depends on priorities, circumstances, feedback, and much more. So startups need management just like any other company. And however, lean startups have a very unique type because they need flexibility, they need a very learning oriented management, which makes it a successful startup. So, if in other words, I can say it's like cultivating entrepreneurship is the responsibility of a senior management. With that, our next big idea is talking about the leap of faith assumptions. So, what are these assumptions? So these assumptions are those kind of assumptions which we take for granted. We don't know if they're right or wrong, we just go with them. And we have two main assumptions, value and growth hypothesis, which Eric has talked about in the book. And it is very crucial to understand and validate both before moving ahead with execution. You know why? Because if they are true, the great opportunity awaits. But if they are false, the startups or business risks total failure. And there are many numerous case studies who are following lean startup methodology. But one of which I would like to share is of Groupon. Groupon is a website and mobile app that offers coupons, cashback on purchases, and group deals to consumers. You know what? Their founder, Andrew Mason, went to the manual first strategy when it came to building Groupon. The company started off with a WordPress site and he started posting deals on a daily basis. When the orders started coming in, he generated PDFs manually and sent out emails containing the vouchers and the coupons to the customer from his personal email during the MVP stage. Clever approach, right? Notice, I'm sure you might have noticed that everything was done manually with the help of third party resources. And it was only after the product idea was validated and there was a genuine need for Groupon felt in the market that automation stepped in and took over the manual aspect of business. What an inspiring journey, right? And with that, it begins. Now, since we have understood about the aspects of uh, cultivating the learning, now what exactly a learning is? Learning is the essential unit of progress for startups, and if we want to view entrepreneurship as an exercise in institution building, the entrepreneur's chief responsibility then is to establish the systems and processes for validated learning. So the question should not be can it be built, but instead, should it be built? That can come from the validating learning principle. With that, I would like to hand over to our next sprinter, Navya.
Right. So taking it forward from Harshita, let's see how do we begin this process of the so talked about validated learning, right? So as a startup, when you begin with some certain leap of faith assumptions. And these assumptions will give you a sense of what your product is, and it will also give you some tuning variables to control your startup. But then how do you know that these assumptions are true or are these assumptions can be validated? So this is when experiments and MVP will come into the picture. So your experiment or an MVP will be your first product. And as a lean startup organization, it's very important for us to have that freedom to be able to experiment and test with MVPs before actually going full forward and building the whole product. So in a lean startup model, every product that you have, every feature, every MVP, it is an experiment for you to achieve the so-called validated learning. What is an MVP? An MVP is a minimum viable product. And even though the name suggests minimum, it's not necessarily the smallest product that you imagine. It's actually the simplest way that you can go through the build, measure, lean feedback loop. And with the least amount of efforts, you can have a validated learning. It is the simplest way to actually start the process of learning. So although when I talk about an MVP, it seems like it's a low quality product and it seems very unacceptable for anybody to actually ship out an early, buggy and incomplete product, right? And as founders and as entrepreneurs, our vision is always to ship out the highest quality product so that everybody is proud of it, right? But in reality, what we should do is to attempt to test it out with a small group of people who are ready to test it out before it's in full production. So an important thing while designing an MVP is that we shouldn't do any additional work beyond what is required for us to start this process of learning. And what, even though it might seem important to have 10 or X number of features into our product, any additional feature that we add will actually be a form of waste. And it will actually delay the process of us validating and learning. And that will come with a tremendous potential cost in terms of the cycle time and learning as well. So moving forward, I'll go over a few examples of startups using different form of MVPs. So starting with Roblox. So like Harshita mentioned, it's a very successful startup. And when you talk about Dropbox, it's a file sharing tool. And when it was conceptualized at that time, it was not very common to have a tool that could, transfer your files across different devices. And it would need certain technical expertise to build, on different platforms, because you have to go from Android to iPhone to Mac to Windows. So the founder was met with this challenge as to how does he demonstrate this product to his users, to the investors, and get validation. So what he did was unexpectedly easy, and he did a video MVP. So the screenshot you see is the actual video MVP, a paper prototype of sorts that he made to demonstrate this technology to all the users and the community. Uh, and it worked. The next type of MVP that I would discuss is the Concierge MVP. So for this, let me take an example of another startup. This one's called Food on the Table. So what this startup does is that it sends users recipes and deals from grocery stores, and it helps them save money for making meals that they love, right? So when you look at the back end, it's a lot of effort that the founder would have to put in to actually make an MVP. He would have to get all the grocery inventory stock, and he would have to list out all the user preferences and so on and so forth. So, but what he did instead, while it was still in the MVP stage, the founder, he created the shopping list and the coupons and the inventory and all of that manually. And then he went to the user as a concierge and provided the services. And once only after user feedback, when he knew that the model was actually viable and was required, he set up the automated process. So although he had no product, no meaningful revenue, no databases of recipes and so on, he was able to make monumental progress and validate his ideas very early on in the cycle. And each week he learned more about what was required to make his product a success. I want to reinstate a fact here that we usually think that MVPs will be very costly and will require a lot of resources. But these very famous examples tell us that it's the most basic thing that you can try out before actually moving on into full production. Moving forward to the next idea that we had, which is of innovation accounting. Now, innovation accounting is a method. It's an approach that the book talks about, which allows us to see if we're actually making progress. It allows us to create these learning milestones. So learning milestones are slightly different from product milestones or the traditional business milestones that we talk about. So instead of measuring numbers in terms of vanity metrics, what we look is learning as a measure of progress for any startup. Now it works very simple. It's 3 learning milestones that you have to look out for. The first one is building an MVP. So when you start, building an MVP will actually help you establish data on where your company is right now. And without having tested your MVP, you will not have a clear picture or understanding of where you are, and you won't be able to actually track your progress. So this is the first learning milestone that you have to cater for. The second one is that the startups, once you have some idea and some validation, you will make an attempt to add features or make changes and micro changes and so on, so that you can make your baseline behavior into the ideal customer behavior that you're working towards for. Now, the third learning milestone is the decision to understand if you should pivot or persevere. So this is very simple. So if your company is making good progress and if you're able to see the change from baseline to the ideal behavior, then you're learning appropriately and everything is working, so you can persevere, right? But if your product strategy is not working, you're not getting the result that you see, and you're also not learning effectively, that is when you should consider pivoting. Now, this brings us to another learning idea, which is that it's okay to pivot. We usually tend to get very attached to our startup ideas, and we don't prefer pivoting, right? Because it's starting the cycle all over again. But the more number of times you pivot, the more successful your startup can be. Because startup productivity is not usually about cranking out more widgets or features. It's actually about aligning our efforts with the business and a product that is creating value and growth. So if you aren't getting results that we desire, we should make more investigations and we should produce new ideas, new hypotheses to be tested and lead towards a possible pivot. And each pivot will definitely lead to new opportunities for further examination. So this is the cycle. So each time we repeat this rhythm, that we establish a baseline, we turn the engine and we make a decision, we ensure that we're moving towards a successful startup. And again, reinstating the fact that pivots are a permanent fact of life for any growing business. And even if you have achieved initial success, you should continue to pivot at all times, because this is the heart of what lean startup method is. It is what is making all these startups that follow the lean methodology resilient in the face of mistakes, because you're not afraid to change your path when anything goes wrong, right? And there are different types of pivots also that you can consider. So this is a chart that shows a cycle in a product cycle, and you can see the number of times that they've actually pivoted and to achieve the success that they want to achieve. Coming to the type of pivots, in the book they talk about a number of pivots. So if you're curious, you can read more, but I'll go about few. So zoom in pivot is, suppose you were focusing on a larger whole. Now you'll just focus on one feature and make that your product. And then zoom out pivot is when you consider the whole product becomes, and that becomes a single feature of a much larger product. With this, Akshita will take forward.
Yeah, so till now we understood how you have a vision, how you go about executing that vision, how do you guide yourself, guide your startup into the right direction. So now what I will talk about is how do you grow once you have the startup and you have your product. So the first idea he talks about in that is that small teams hit the nail. What does this mean? So he stresses about small batches, which he calls single piece flow. So in the cycle that Harshita talked about, build, measure, and learn, if we have a lot of requirements at the same time that we want to execute, it will take you a lot of time to go through that whole cycle. The more you build, the more you'll have to measure and the more you'll have to test, right? So it will make yourself very slow. And the key to a good startup is being fast. So that is where the concept of small batches comes in, where you make it the minimum amount of work and requirements and continuously test it. So this is an example. So now you have your activity is like to take a bunch of letters and put them in envelopes and post it. So for that, you need to fold your letter, you need to put it in the envelope, you need to put stamps on the envelope and then send it out, right? So there are two ways to do it. You can do it with each singular letter, putting it and doing the whole cycle, or you can do it in batches where you take all the envelopes, fold all the letters and put all the stamps and then send it out. What would you think is the better way to do it? Any guesses? Okay, so the actual way that really works out and turns out is more efficient is the first way, where because where you do the whole process at once. Even though it seems inefficient, it actually is scientifically proven to be better. Why? Because a small batch approach always finishes a product every few seconds, whereas a large batch approach will deliver all the products at once. So you can clearly see a lot of flaws in that system. The first one being that you can't identify problems till the very end. But in this process, you can identify problems very quickly. Like, for example, the letter doesn't fit in the size of envelope that you have bought. So this sort of system was implemented by Toyota in what they call the and-on card. So this allowed any worker to ask for help as soon as they noticed any problem on the assembly line. And when they pulled the cord, it would stop the production line till it's corrected. So, I mean, this seems very stupid, right? Like, why would you stop an assembly line every time you see a small little problem? An assembly line works best when it's just continuously moving. But it actually worked out for them because the benefits of finding and fixing problems faster outweighed the cost of pausing that whole process. And this became a win for Toyota. So this theory of Toyota's success is what is being applied to lean startup even here. Obviously, the aim here is not to manufacture efficiently, but it is to improve the speed at which you're doing validated learning. So it's to build a sustainable business as quickly as possible. And working in small batches will make that whole process of the build, measure, learn quickly, and you can do it multiple times to ensure that you have a correct product which is aligned. And this one way to do it is through continuous deployment, which is you release it and then keep tracking it so that you can make improvements. Now the next big takeaway, which is sorting out your engine of growth. So how do you grow as a startup? So what Eric Ries defines as growth is sustainable growth, which is customers drive new customers are driven by repeat customers. So how do you do how are customers how is customer growth achieved? Which is, it can be done through word of mouth, it can be done through product usage, it can be done through paid advertising or repeat customers. So engines of growth are basically ways to focus your growth on a small set of metrics. So each startup can determine which engine fits it the best. The three types. The first one is the sticky engine of growth. So in this engine of growth, you want to focus on making your customers continuously use your product or service, make loyalty, ensuring their loyalty is the aim of this one. So what are the sort of questions you would answer? That is, are the users returning? Are they engaging? Is there a high churn rate? And it's tough if people are not using your product continuously in the long run. So the rules that govern this sticky growth engine is that your rate of new customer acquisition exceeds the churn rate. So what is churn rate? Churn rate is the rate at which people leave your product, like they're not happy with it, so they are not retained. So that's simple math. You want the number of new users to be greater than the number of people who are leaving your product. An example of this would be Uber. So the aim of Uber is to make sure that you're continuously using the app and you remain loyal to it and engaged with the app. The next one is the viral engine of growth, which would somewhat seem like the simplest one because it requires the least amount of investment. It's based on word of mouth marketing and product engagement. So this implies that each customer will bring in more than one person who will become a paying customer to your business. So it depends not only on word of mouth, but also as it can also be a consequence of normal product use. That is, the customers are not intentionally acting as evangelists, but just using the product makes it spread. An example of it would be Google Pay. The more the number of people use Google Pay, they will convert more people to use it so as to pay them. Hotmail also used this strategy wherein at the bottom of each of their email messages would be a link which said, PS, get your free email at Hotmail with a clickable link. And this led to an exponential growth. So how is it measured? It's measured by a virality coefficient, which is the invitation sent per user multiplied by the conversion rate. The ideal one would be to be greater than 1, which means that each person brings in more than one person and this is what will compound the growth. The third and final type is the paid engine of growth. So this refers to an ability of the startup to charge a sum of money for the product so that they can spend money to acquire even more users. An example of this is Byju's, wherein they charge for their product and they keep a high enough margin that they can use a lot of money to make to sponsor the Indian cricket team and give out huge advertisements with Shah Rukh Khan in them. So in this, the maths of it is again very simple. You need to have a customer lifetime value that is greater than the cost per acquisition. So what does this mean? Customer lifetime value is the money that a customer pays for his whole lifetime as a customer, and cost per acquisition is the amount you will be spending in your marketing or however you're trying to bring in the customers. So like you can see, each of these methods will work differently for different startups. If say Facebook or WhatsApp would have tried to be a paid engine of growth, it would not have worked out. They had to be viral because it depended on the number of people using them. So each startup will have to choose what suits them.
So adding on to Akshata, you have some growth. Now you want to analyze and measure this growth. So how do you measure your progress the right way? So one of the ways that in the book was cohort analysis. So traditionally, when we, can you move to the next slide, Akshata? Yeah. So traditionally, when we usually analyze charts and our data, we usually fall back on these revenue numbers, gross numbers, and cumulative totals, which give us a very wrong idea of how a product is doing. It sometimes also doesn't give us any actionable insight, and we can't really figure out what the problem is with the product, right? But a cohort analysis would be a solution to all of this. So what you do, instead of looking at the gross and the total numbers, you look at the subset of behavior analytics and break down the users into different cohorts or groups with common characteristics. So, for example, in this chart, instead of looking the total number of users on the app or downloads on the app, you look at each individual cohort. Say people who registered but didn't log in but had no conversion. So when you do that, you're able to figure out where the actual problem lies and find out an action for it. Keeping this in mind, it's also important for us to be able to distinguish between vanity and actionable metrics. So we need to ensure that while measuring data with metrics, we're looking at metrics that are actionable, accessible, and auditable. So by this I mean, if it's actionable, I mean that they demonstrate a clear cause and effect, so you know what's going wrong. With accessible, it's simple to understand, tangible, concrete units, and that's distributed widely across the organization, so everybody in the organization can also access it. And auditable would mean that it's credible to all the inputs. Another method that the book talks about is split test, which is basically also referred to as A/B testing, where you, so if you want to roll out a feature, you roll out two different versions of the product. So feature A and an existing feature B. So when you do that, and if you do that at the same time, you're able to figure out which feature is actually working and be able to understand where is that you have to make progress.
Okay, so the last and final takeaway, which is also one of the last things you do in the cycle before going in deeper, which is the 5 whys. What is it? So it is so in lean startups, like we've insisted till now, it is you're supposed to go fast. But if you're going too fast, you can cause a lot of more problems. So this is a stage where you pause and you reflect on what you're doing, and really find out if you're making some mistakes that you need to correct. So you must be thinking, what does it mean, the 5 whys? It's very simple. It just means asking why 5 times. And now this is going to sound a little crazy. It's like, how a child asks why, and it drives all of us crazy. But it's a little more than that. So it was originally developed by Sakichi Toyoda, and that is in Toyota. And so what does it mean? The whole idea of asking why 5 times is that you discover the root of the problem, and you remove all the layers and just focus on the cause. So this is a very simple one, which is that somebody skipped a red light and you kept asking why, and you realize that the root cause of them skipping the red light is that they forgot to check the battery in their alarm. So it seems very unrelated, but you have discovered the actual problem that you need to fix, which so at the root of every seemingly technical problem is actually a human problem, and the 5 whys is a way to discover that. So it can uncover this, and it's in by this process you're not just replacing the fuse of some machinery, but actually going to be training the engineer who's using it. So this whole process fixates on fixing the causes and not the symptoms. So, but doing this will obviously highlight a lot of unpleasant facts about your organization. It will call for certain rearrangements or an expense of time and money on training manpower, but which you could have been investing in products and projects and features. But then the overall payoff is much larger. The impact and the number of crises are reduced, and once you do this, your team will obviously speed up again. So it's very important to do this, to pause and reflect, because if you're working too fast, you're trading quality for time, you obviously will end up making a lot of sloppy mistakes. And the 5 whys technique prevents that, allowing teams to work at the optimal pace where they can come up with the best product. Yeah, so those are our 10 takeaways from the Lean Startup. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining on Sunday evening, and I hope we added some value. If there's any questions you can ask in the chat, we'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, please add it in the chat. And I want you to take a minute and give us on a scale of 1 to 5, what was your rating? This would kind of help us understand how you felt throughout the presentation and what was it. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how was it? Okay, keep the comments rolling in. People are going to see. Well done. 4. Great. 6. Somebody rated 6 out of 5. Awesome. Great ratings overall. We're seeing some consistent 4.5 to 5 average. That's a great rating. So congrats, folks. I'm super excited and happy that you finished this review. And this leads to the second half of the whole thing. If you are considering being part of the club, you can go to productbook.club and you can look up how to join a part of it. There are some simple join waitlist for WhatsApp groups, or there is a form you can fill to join us. And we will be posting announcements for next year's book club. So I'll keep you posted, and you can join the reading sprint like the people who are part of this today and reviewed it. I invite one of the sprinters to come onto the stage and share how their experience was with the reading sprint. Anybody? Yeah, Harshita, Akshita, or Navya.
I can share. Then maybe Navya and Akshita can also add. So honestly, like it was my second book review with Product Book Club. Though I read it personally, but being a part of Product Book Club first helps you to network with folks like Navya and Akshita, Madhuri definitely, because I get to know about how they are thinking, how they are communicating their idea, and then how can I improvise. So that helps one to grow and learn in a collaborative manner. Second, being a designer, this and reading this product book has been a bit challenging in the first week of reviewing it, because there are so many technical terms which I haven't heard of yet, and it was very difficult for me to comprehend initially. But then slowly and slowly, with everybody's motivation, I was able to skim through, and here I am presenting you with you in front of you. So that has faded the fear and helped me to take more product books in the future. So that were the two takeaways majorly, but there are more.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Harshita, and congrats on overcoming your fear. Now you know that you are your own limitation, which is fine. You can keep coming back and reviewing more books. The door is always open. Amazing.
Would love to. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Navya
Yeah.
or Akshita?
So it's both of our second time too. I mean, Madhuri knows. So Navya and I have also become repeat sprinters, because it's really been a very wholesome experience, because you usually don't read these kind of books, and especially if you're not given a deadline, you definitely don't read these kind of books. They're quite like Harshita had said, it's like a reference book. So not very gripping, I would say, but it's really been a very great learning. So sharing it and really going through and understanding it.
I would like
Amazing.
to add on one thing. So
Go
for
ahead.
me particularly, like analyzing and keep giving all the 10 key takeaways enhanced my learning from the book a lot. Like before I used to just read and I used to forget everything. Now I am able to retain much more than before.
Amazing, amazing. So thank you so much for being a part of the sprints, especially the sprinters. Congrats on finishing this. And you've ended your year beautifully by reviewing the number of books. So yes, so you can apply this to your life. You can apply this to not just product books. Yes. I see some questions down there. Do one of the sprinters want to take this up? Yeah, especially about, does the book have any recommendation on non-SaaS products?
So, like I've already answered, it does. I think it covers a lot of other examples as well. And in general, also talks about how you can apply to anything in general, the lean startup methodology.
Okay, great. Most of the examples that were shared in the book also were from car factories and Toyotas and things like that. They're already non-SaaS products, so definitely that's something to consider when you're reading this book. Yeah. Okay, so we have also another question I received here, which is, apart from this other book, what else do you read, like apart from the product books that was asked? Any one of the sprinters can answer that.
There are, I mean, sometimes it depends upon if I'm reading a heavy book like product book because it took some more time. So I prefer a light book in parallel, which is like currently I'm reading Principles, Life and Work. So that helps me to keep a balance of being like both in personal and professional life. Yeah, that's what I can share.
Awesome. Yeah. I think they wanted to understand, like, do you read on these two things? Yeah. Somebody's like, I wanted to be a part of it, just skeptical if I could finish within 2. Most of us are working or studying. Sprinters, please answer. Are there any plans to make it 3-week sprint? 3-week sprint makes you lazy. We have tested it. You will not finish the book. You will not come for reviews. Sprinters, please give your experience in that.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand what they're saying. It is kind of tough to take out time. I mean, we try to take out time every day, but I'll be honest, I did not take out a lot of time on my first week. I think I hardly read 30 pages. But the important thing is you're looking for 10 takeaways, right? So you can honestly just skim the book and then you get your all major 10 ideas and then you deep dive further into each idea to understand it. So that really helped me this time. That's not something that I did in my first sprint. Yeah.
I would like to add one more thing, which Akshata has already mentioned about like how in the initial week it was a bit less, and then as we come closer to the deadline, we start pushing ourselves. So, having said that, we do have the separate club for the sprinters where Madhuri, the facilitator, and we have Karti also, who always like on daily basis pushes one to take 25 minutes just to read and just to skim. So every day 25 minutes, honestly, it's nothing. If you will just start reading, you will get a better idea. But if we start pushing at the end, it will be like a whole lot for books like Inspired and the one we reviewed today, Lean Startup. But for books which are like self-help or the one I talked about, Principles, Life and Work, we are able to relate more if we are going through something. So that takes very less time. But these books honestly needs those consistent practice. And 2 weeks, I believe, it's quite sufficient enough because this book has very less chapters, but my personal experience from one of the book called Inspired, it has 67 chapters, and we were also able to cover that in just 2 weeks. So I believe definitely it will be a very good and challenging experience for you all if you join that.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for those insights. Thanks for keeping that motivation. I'm just curious, whether to join or not, because if I don't finish it in a sprint, then that will be a problem. So yeah, thanks for sharing your experiences.
Awesome. We will post the announcement of the next book soon on LinkedIn and WhatsApp. Once it's up, you can join the reading sprint group. So you're guided and you can finish it. There's a playbook people receive on how to storytell, how you get a nudge almost every day, unless I forget. But people know that every day you read for 25 minutes and that actually adds up to your compounding. You will learn how to read books after joining it. So don't worry about things. You'll be able to pick it up. All right. Amazing. Thank you so much. We actually finished before time and we've had a great review. Thanks again, sprinters. We will catch you in the next year with a brand new book. I'll see you all. Happy New Year. Way ahead. See you everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhuri. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.